Understanding Gen Z's Political Sway is hosted by the Skillman Foundation.
Detroit is a city of visionaries, a place where people are working innovatively and holistically to transform our education system. The Skillman Visionary Awards celebrates education changemakers and invests in the future they're building. Transforming the education system is possible, and it's happening in Detroit.
Please welcome President and Chief Executive Officer of the Skillman Foundation, Angelique Power.
Good morning, everybody. At the Skillman Foundation, we envision a Detroit where young people activate the entire city. From classroom to after-school program, urban garden, art space, local business to local library, Greenway Park to athletic field. Detroit will be known locally and nationally as a place where young people lead, where families can stay for generations and neighborhoods feel like electric campuses. Folks of all ages exchanging and engaging in ideas, and where people have the resources they need to thrive. Skillman's focus is keenly placed on the express lane into this exact future. And that's our public education system. Everyone goes to school. Schools are the center of thriving communities. We are aiming at collectively reinventing education so it's innovative, it's customized to each student's need, it's nourishing. It is a hub for communities today while supercharging youth to be able to redesign tomorrow. To get there, we're leaning into our foundation's superpowers. We have access to capital, and we have connections to brilliant people most proximate to education systems. And we have connections to brilliant people inside of policy spaces, inside of business spaces, and more. The theme of this conference is bridging. And this is one of our strategic themes at Skillman. We are radical bridgers. We know that we all need each other to get to where we're going. And we especially need young people. And so the Skillman Foundation is placing a bet on Detroiters. We're placing a bet on young people, and we're placing a bet on root cause work. Our new strategy, called People-Powered Education, is rooted into tapping in today's community brilliance, and it's connected to policymaking to ensure there's long-term sustainable change. Rocking with young people is just a bonus of our work. When we first came to the Mackinac Policy Conference with some incredible young people 2 years ago, talking about Gen Z felt new. Today, most of you probably know a fair amount about this generation. Like that there are 1.8 billion young people on the planet. Aged 13 to 27, Gen Z is in school, they're in the workplace, they've created their own businesses on and offline, they are deeply involved in social impact work. They are dominating TikTok, YouTube, Discord. They are ruthless about millennials. They are upfront about mental health. They are making and breaking people, brands, influencers, and past ideas on the daily. Books are being written about them. John Della Volpe, a pollster from Harvard's Institute of Politics, wrote Fight, How Gen Z is Channeling Their Fear and Passion to Save America. This book is an incisive look at how Gen Z is and will continue to have a powerful impact on policy. Let me ask this audience a few questions and answer only if you're comfortable. How many have had a close friend or family member who suffers from anxiety or depression? How many of you have had regular active shooter drills in your workplace? How many have a friend or family member who has been a victim of gun violence? Della Volpe's book begins with a foreword from David Hogg, one of the victim-turned activists who survived the brutal school shooting in Parkland, Florida. He writes of his generation, Gen Z, and I quote, "We are a generation forced to grow up in fear of becoming victims of gun violence in our neighborhoods and in our schools. We inherit a natural world that may have already reached its tipping point. At every turn, our institutions are failing us and we are paying the price. Half of our generation reports feelings of depression and or anxiety. The government reports our stress levels are twice those of adults over 30. But rather than becoming cynical or retreating from these challenges, we fight back. And because of this exposure to the fragility of life, to the fragility of institutions and of the planet, blind faith in what currently exists is gone. This is a generation of entrepreneurs, creatives, agitators on behalf of social good, committed to live in purpose. As someone who hangs out with Gen Z a lot, I can tell you that the big ideas are real, the humor, at times beguiling, the language, no cap is Riz. When my 14-year-old heard me rehearse that, she was like, "Mama, please don't do that, please." And we're just beginning to understand the depth of Gen Z's power and influence. What I can tell you is that when one studies the past 50 years, every single social justice movement that changed the world was led by young people. And there are reasons for this. One, they're closest to the problems. They are at the bottom of the privilege pyramid, and they bear the brunt of adult decisions made on their behalf without their wisdom. Two, they are natural risk takers. We discuss how the frontal cortex is not fully formed until you're 26 as a negative. The upside is that they are bold, they are naturally brave, they are not burdened by aversion to risk that comes with age. This does not mean that many of us agree with the way young people go about change. We may not agree with the approach, we may not agree with the message, or even the change that is being fought for. But that is not the point. The point is that change, plate tectonic change, is happening. And it's all around us. And young people are at the forefront of leading to something new with or without older generations. In terms of their political sway, Gen Zers make up 1 in 6 Americans eligible to vote. 4 million turn 18 each year. Their imprint on elections here in Michigan is undeniable, topping the nation for Gen Z turnout in 2020 and again in the midterms in 2022. Today, there are 1.5 million Gen Zers registered to vote in Michigan. And to a poll that was done by Voters of Tomorrow, 77% of Gen Z respondents nationwide said they will be voting in November. There is wide belief that young people will, in fact, make or break outcomes this election year. Today, youth calls for policy changes top the news cycles and are being heard in places across the country, from college campuses to cities to towns. We hear from those whose voices are the loudest in those news stories. But the truth is, there are a range of questions and ideas that Gen Z is lifting that go unreported and unrealized. Remember the description of Gen Z I shared in the beginning? Big ideas, entrepreneurial, motivated to fight the status quo. All of this means that politically, Gen Z is completely up for grabs. They are not beholden to one party or another, extremely values-driven. They vote with their dollars, their social media platforms, and they also vote on who has pissed them off the most and who has engaged with them the least. Often in spaces like this, we talk about young people without young people. But if we leave a policy conference and avoid hearing from young people in this moment on policy, then shame on us. Let's turn to our panel, offering a multitude of perspectives from two Gen Zers of different political leanings that are offered here without partisanship. Keep in mind, they're not speaking for all of Gen Z, although many of their ideas do reflect the youth polling research from John Della Volpe. I instead encourage you to keep the conversation going with the Gen Zers in your own circles long after this panel ends. The question isn't, do you agree? The question is, are you listening? Let's meet the panelists.
Joining Angelique Power on stage, please welcome Youth and Community Organizer for Congress of Communities, Esther Guerrero, and Grassroots Coordinator and Policy Advisor for the Small Business Association of Michigan, Jacob Manning.
Well, I'm so excited. We've had several conversations. How are you guys feeling?
Great.
Feeling great.
Okay, good.
It's really good to see all the faces in the room.
So I want to start with you, Esther. What is your first memory of when politics or policy came alive for you? And what was it about and what did you do?
Absolutely, thank you. When I first started getting into the political world, it all started when I was in high school. I actually attended 3 different high schools my junior year. I had the privilege of attending a Catholic private school in the suburbs, about a 15-20 minute drive from my house in Southwest Detroit. And so before that, though, I attended a charter school, academy for elementary. So middle school, part of high school was at a private Catholic school where it was predominantly white. And I was one of the few students of color at the school. And so I experienced this very enriching education despite going through some struggles and battling with things like racism and discrimination and inequities that I hadn't yet realized that I was going through at the time. And then my junior year, I had to transfer. And I actually transferred to another academy in Dearborn and was very observant of facilities, the curriculum, student behavior, just all these things that I was just in myself kind of observing. So then I also had to transfer from that school due to other situations, transportation mainly. And then I had to go to a school in Detroit, and I attended a Detroit public school. And then there is where, again, I was observing, noticing so many differences between these two schools that I attended. And this school had 3 floors, 1,000+ students, and I'm coming from private school where my graduating class was about 70 people. The academy that I attended was also about 70, 50 people. And then jumping right into this city school that's in close to my home, I just noticed the lack of resources, old books, old desks, old chairs, mismatched chairs, teachers who maybe don't have the drive that they had at the beginning of their career. I had an experience where I was trying to catch up on my AP chemistry work, and I kept insisting with my teacher, I need the work to catch up, and he straight up told me, why do you care so much? And as a 17-year-old who just transferred twice, and my whole life is kind of like flipped, and I'm coming to the school assuming that I'm gonna get all the resources that I need, the care that I need, the attention that I need, that I require to continue to develop, because I, as an individual, want to go to school, want to go to college, and so I wasn't getting that. And so I slowly, with some friends, kind of was just always complaining, always saying, why is it like this for us? You know, I went to this school and it wasn't like that. They have different resources. Like, why don't we get that? Why is it that I had to drive 20 minutes out of the city to get a better education? Why can't I get it here in my home, in my city? And so my friend must have seen this and invited me to join the Latinx Youth Council at Congress of Communities, where is actually where I'm working now and running the program. And so I joined as a 17-year-old, and I was so excited, ready with just full of ideas and open to conversation. I joined, and they were working on a project called Nuestro Futuro, which means our future, which is a college access program that was created by the youth, by our cohort that year, which is a mix of, it's all Latinx youth from Southwest Detroit who also attend schools in Southwest Detroit. And we created this project because we saw a lack in our community. We weren't seeing people who look like us getting to higher education, going to university, and staying there, not dropping out, and taking care of themselves, and finding connections and networking, and all these things. And so we created this program, and it was very successful. We reached many students in the city. It was a 6-week program. We invited counselors from universities. We invited college students to come and speak on a panel. We also invited parents. We talked about Latinx history. We talked about self-care and how that's important in higher education. And this was us as high school students, not yet being there. And so that was kind of the beginning. And I also remember having a walkout because of the Parkland shooting that year in 2017. That was actually one of the first actions, demonstrations that I did along with my peers in high school at DPSCD. So that's kind of where it all started.
Thank you, Esther. How did it start for you, Jacob?
Yeah, I think growing up I was always interested in politics. My dad would let me watch The Daily Show and The Colbert Report. So that was kind of my intro. He was a big NPR listener too, and so that was my intro. I went to MSU for political science with the intention of going to law school. But in my senior year of college, I ended up doing an internship with a state representative, and I think it was that experience for me that really set me on this path, made me realize that maybe I didn't want to go to law school, because I had this idea in my mind of what governance was. You know, you see on the national news what happens in DC, and you see that it's a very ineffective organism. The entire scene is, and it's so toxic too. And so being in Lansing with, who was at the time my state representative, and being able to intern for her and seeing what sort of conversations were happening with actual governance, and seeing that there were conversations that were being had and compromises that were being made, but it was for the betterment of the state. And that was something that really inspired me and made me want to continue on that path. And so I continued to work in the legislature after her term was ended and she was term limited. And now I'm with the Small Business Association of Michigan, and we advocate on behalf of 33,000 small businesses, all small businesses, but our 33,000 small business owners who are members of ours across the state.
Thank you. This next question I call swipe left, swipe right. And there is actually a Gen Zer in Detroit named Arabia who created an app that is based on Tinder that helps young people learn more about politicians. And it has the act of swiping left or swiping right. Pogo is the name, so you can look that up. But let's talk about, there's lots that has to do with policy beyond politicians, but let's talk politicians. What makes a politician attractive, and what are deal breakers? Jacob, you start.
Yeah, I would say, and part of this was just the lane that I came up in through the legislature, is that the thing that I value most in a politician is willingness to not compromise. Compromise is a bit of a bad word, but willing to have conversations with people that you disagree with, to settle differences, and to find a solution that is good. I think that there are so many times, and particularly in DC, where we see a problem that's festering for years and years, decades even, that isn't solved because it's not politically convenient to solve it. And so what I like out of a politician is someone who's willing to make that sacrifice even if it's not politically convenient for them.
For me, it's those folks who are on the ground with the people doing the work on the ground, who show up when they're invited to one of our community meetings, who are also planting in our community gardens. I think that's what's attractive for me from politicians. Those who follow through with their word, who really listen to community, and who show up for community, who are present when it's necessary, and who are going to speak for us when the time comes, and that are taking the things that we are asking with them truly and passing it on to wherever it needs to go. I think a perfect example is Stephanie Chang. She's great. She's always showing up in our community, always at even family parties, things like that. It just shows that you are a part of us, a part of the people, and that you're truly wanting to work with and for us. So that, to me, is what's really attractive about political candidates, someone who's with the people.
So let's talk about the presidential election. The common refrain that we hear a lot is that the two candidates are too old. And we know that in the past, some of the most successful politicians were younger. Take JFK, who ushered in a young family into the White House, and it captivated the country. Take Obama, who during his campaign leveraged the power of youth and social media to go viral. There's the phenomenon of college students with Bernie Sanders. And the figure under whom Gen Z really developed their political consciousness is Trump, for either way or all the ways. So I want to ask you first, can you be too old to be in politics?
I can take this one.
Yes.
I think that we're in a moment now where it is not politically advantageous to be older. I think that there's a lot of natural tension between young people and old people right now. I think that Gen Z in particular is very dismissive of boomers. And I think that it makes young people feel like, when they're not being listened to. You look at who's in charge, and it's a bunch of old people, and it makes them feel that their voices aren't heard. And so I think another thing that isn't helpful about this moment is that once you get older, you tend to have senior moments, and with cameras everywhere, you can be giving a press conference, and you can have a moment that is clipped and reposted on social media, and it just further exasperates this idea and this notion with young people that the people that they're electing are not representative of them.
Can you be too young?
I would like some baseline level competency. I think that I, I think something would be nice. And I think if you have like a large body like the House, I think maybe it is helpful to have some young people and have a diverse group of people who truly speak for the populace. But I think that there's just, life is complicated as it is. Just growing up, I feel like I've been learning so much just in the past 5-10 years. I can't imagine also being tasked with making decisions for people while trying to figure out how I'm making decisions for myself.
John Della Volpe in his book talks about how other generations don't understand what it's like to walk into a classroom and have a passing thought about, and this like chokes me up, but about where to hide in case a shooter comes into the room. And he makes the point that the passing thought, it isn't a conceptual worry. It is really a passing thought about daily acts of survival. So when I think about that and I contextualize so much of how Gen Z is showing up right now, it makes a lot more sense. I want to first ask you, what do you think the perceptions are of Generation Z? There are a lot of people who came into this room because of their perceptions of this generation. There are media interviews I'm doing where there's going to be one that's like, well, you know, Gen Z is ... So first of all, what do you guys think the perception is of Gen Z?
I think when people think about Gen Z, they probably think about a lot of young people who grew up online, possibly, or this big crowd of individuals who have so much power and might not know it, but also know it and use it to their advantage. I think it's kind of this perception of young, but also mature in the sense of their experiences. I think that's what folks might perceive of Gen Z.
Jacob?
I would agree with that. I think the thing that sets Gen Z apart from other generations is that we were the first generation to grow up online. And I think that we grew up in a time online that is different than it is now, where parents can control and mitigate some of their child's watching habits, control what they're watching. I mean, we grew up in the Wild West, and I think that was damaging, in my opinion, for Gen Z, and I don't think that people on the outside fully understand that. I think that there's a pretty common understanding of like how harmful social media was for young girls. But I don't think, unless you're speaking with Gen Z, members of Gen Z every day, like we are, I don't think that you'd realize how many people are incredibly pessimistic. I think that I talk to people on a regular basis who thinks that everything's going to hell fast. And I think that it's concerning, and it's not good for your mental health to constantly be surrounded online by all of these things that further these feelings, whether they're true or not. And I think that would be the number one thing for me.
The Anxious Generation is a great book if anyone is interested in reading more about social media and its impact on young people. So I talked earlier about 1.5 million Gen Z registered voters in Michigan, the 70% of Gen Zers who say they will be going to the polls. What do you think will be top of mind for Gen Z as they head to the polls this year?
Absolutely. I believe one of the main things that will be on people's minds is what's happening in Gaza. We are all witnessing this happening on our cell phones. We just saw that Rafah was attacked, and there's just images of babies being burnt alive. And these things are on our phones. Like Jacob mentioned, yes, we are the generation that grew up online, and now we're witnessing something horrendous online. And our generation, I believe, is a generation of humanity that believes in humanity. We might be a little anxious of the future, but what we want to see is a bright future. We want to have an established life. We want there to be a green earth when we reach 30. We want there to be natural resources when we become 50. I think that's definitely something that's going to affect a lot of votes this year, because we have just continuously been seeing for the past months now, since October, that our government isn't doing what it needs to solve this crisis, this huge issue that young people are really passionate about. We're seeing protests happening every single day. My alma mater, Wayne State University, has an encampment happening right now. They are committed to this issue, and they are fighting for divestment. We are actively boycotting. We haven't stopped since October 7th because this is an issue that really, really matters to us. And we will not stand back. We don't want to hear no, because we know that there's other options. And that's really going to impact a lot of Gen Z voters this year, because again, it's incredible to see that so much has stayed the same and not moved forward. And then along with funding, inflation, the economy, we still don't have as good access to healthcare as we should. We have all this funding that's going to a war, and we have homelessness that we're struggling with. There are youth in the streets that don't have homes. Where we have an education system that we really need to fix. We have students who are not passing the 3rd grade reading level. We have people who are sick and are staying sick. We have people who are needing resources to just move forward in life. And this issue is the issue that our generation has chosen to stick on, because we are fully seeing how our government is not serving us and is just tearing apart this part of the world. And I have Palestinian friends. I also have Israeli friends. So this topic for me is it hits home. I was actually able to visit Palestine on a study abroad, and it was a very impactful trip. And again, this is just one of the biggest issues that will be on people's mind, and then that trickles into inflation, into the economy, into all these systems that aren't being fixed, and we're seeing our money just go into something that we do not want to support, that we do not want to fund. We want to fund healthcare, we want to fund education, we want to fund housing. This is where we want our hard-earned money to go, not to destruction.
Thank you. Thank you. Jacob, what do you think will be on Gen Z's mind when they get to the ballot box?
Yeah, I think I talk to small business owners every day, and amongst small business owners and just my friends and Gen Z and colleagues alike, I think it's really going to be hard to ignore just the general feeling that people have of the economy being in a downspell right now. I think that inflation, sustained inflation for this long, has really put the squeeze on people, and I think that trickles down to every single piece of life. And so I think that's going to be pretty hard to ignore for a lot of people, particularly for those in Gen Z who, as you mentioned, are fresh in their careers, don't have advanced salaries. I think that it's really hitting hard for them as their rent keeps increasing, as they're trying to pay off their student loans, as they're trying to pay for groceries, and it's a lot. So I think that's going to be hard to ignore.
Conversely, the things that you lift are not on the shoulders of one person, on one policymaker or one business or one university. But what would it take for a policymaker or a business leader or a business or a university to make you believe again?
I don't think it's necessarily about not believing. I think it's about working together, intergenerational collaboration. The question earlier about, is a person too old? Maybe to make decisions for a population that's really young, but what I think is a great idea is mentorship. What I think is a great idea is telling us stories. Storytelling is powerful. Tell me what it was like for you growing up. Let me know what you experienced and how that went and what I can learn from it. I think that's what's important, that we work together so that we can see the change that we want to see, because we believe that there's a change. Gen Z believes that we will make a better world for ourselves, because we have seen, we're a generation that's just a mix of people. We come from different backgrounds, different cultures. We all look differently. It's not just one, but together we are one. And I think that if politicians see that alike with us and are willing to work with us and are willing to teach us and guide us, that's what we need to move forward. And that would give a lot of folks the ability to believe again. But I don't think it's about not us believing. I think we believe, we're ready to do the work. We're ready to work together. And I think that's what we need to figure out. How do we do this? How do we learn from our elders? And how do we accept the knowledge that they're giving us? But how do our elders also accept that this is a different time and that things are changing and will continue to change? And so it's a balance, but it really does need to become an intergenerational collaboration.
I'm going to open it up to questions after this last question, so get ready. They have mics. They're going to run around. My final question is, what unites us as Americans?
I think it seems hard to answer that now, just because there's the atmosphere is, there's so much polarization. But I think at the end of the day, I think everybody just wants to do what's best for them and their families. I think that that's at least a base, and that's something we can build on. There's so many different ideological differences in the United States, but at its core, we're all trying to row in the same direction.
I agree. I think our humanity is what unites us. I'm proud to be an American. I'm also proud to be a Mexican American. But being from this country is an opportunity. And you see a lot of people coming to this country for the opportunity, just as my parents did. And I think that's what unites us as Americans. We know that we're living in the land of opportunity, in the land of the free, these things that we've been saying for so many years, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud to be an American, and I think that's what unites us. I think Americans ride for each other. I think despite our issues, it's just like this pride, this sense of pride. I think we also very much think that we're the best country in the world, and that's what unites us. We all kind of have we're excited to be from here. We're proud to be from here. And you'll see that in many different places, from the South to the North to the West Coast to the East Coast. You'll see it everywhere. It's just our pride in our humanity. I think at the end of the day, we know that we're part of this big, incredible country that is just a melting pot of culture and language and people, and we're proud of it. And I'm proud of it. I'm proud to be a part of that.
What questions do we have? We have Ken right here. And introduce yourself too, please.
Good morning. My name is Ken Donaldson. I'm the president and CEO of Black United Fund of Michigan, a youth empowerment organization for 54 years. And we see it firsthand. We touch probably nearly 5,000 youth a year. And Gen Z and millennials are some of our major targets as well. And one of the things that I noticed, and I'm going to present this to both of you all, is we just noticed this dysfunctional family situation in most of the kids that we are ministering to. And it used to be years ago that families had this moral fiber. The parents, if they didn't want to, they still had to go to church and things like that. Gen Z nowadays, the church attendance is way down. And now, as you mentioned, the competition is the internet. And so TikTok, you can try to teach your child something, and then they come back to you and tell you what TikTok said. And so then you try to figure out, well, you know, how do I address this without getting angry? You call your child in the other room, and the next thing you know, you see your phone ringing, and they're texting you. And they don't want to talk anymore. They want to text with you every time they want to communicate. And I saw a statistic that said the number one thing that prolongs life above exercise, diet, and everything is socialization. And so our kids now are really kind of, you know, withdrawing, connecting to the technology, and that's what's raising them. And so my question is, how do we break that? Because I know the family used to be the source of success of children's future. That ain't working no more. So do you have any recommendations of how we can rebuild strong families and disconnect them from the things that creates the evils of society?
Thank you for your question. I have an answer.
Okay.
I believe that restorative practices are very, very helpful. Like Angelique mentioned, we're kind of this generation that's full of anxiety. We went through 9/11, recession as kids, and now we're growing up. We're witnessing war right before our eyes. All these things that just make us want to lock ourselves up in a room and not talk to anyone. Maybe not even talk in person. Maybe that's the best way to reach that individual in that moment. And that's, again, where we need to work together to understand where we are now with technology. And youth also need to understand how it was then without. And there needs to be that conversation to reach a middle ground, a compromise of what can we do to still communicate, but considering the background, the context. Like, why are you feeling this way? Asking those kinds of questions. What can I do for you? What's a better way for communication for you? I think a lot of the times young people aren't fully seen. I think they have a lot of pressure on their shoulders. They have a lot of social standards that they're struggling with. I mean, think about when you were 13, 14, 15. It was a very anxious time, I'm sure. And now with technology, it's even harder. So I think looking into restorative practices is very helpful and has been helpful for me. Not even just with working with young people that I do, but with myself, learning how to engage in dialogue and not getting upset with maybe something that I don't agree with. And I am actually an individual who's religious. I practice my religion and I do attend church. And it is something that is a struggle with the religious community. But I think what young people want is community. And whether they seek that online, because you can find a community online. I actually met my partner online. And
He's great.
and you can find community online. And as long as that's safe, then I think it's appropriate. And we also, with the economy and inflation and things like that, you know, we seek third places. These places where we can go to a cafe, or we can go to the roller rink, or we can go to play, I don't know, badminton, something. We are seeking that, we want that, but we are not seeing that be invested in as much. And that's why it's also, we have to bring it back to what is going on in the world that is not creating community for young people. What do young people want to see in the community so that they can go together with their friends after school? For example, my job, we have a youth-driven community house. The young people love it, and they love going there after school. And maybe there's some youth that were a little bit closed off, but then they discovered this place, and they feel good here, they feel safe, and they want to be there. So I think investing in spaces, restorative practices, and reaching a compromise.
And youth-led, I hear you saying too.
Youth-led, yes.
I know that at Skillman we fund a lot of organizations, and that a lot of times we'll hear from some organizations that say, how do we get young people here? How do we get young people involved? And really a lot of the ones that are most successful have youth driving the programming and co-leading, co-designing what those programs are. Do we have a question? Please introduce yourself.
For sure. My name is King Bethel. I am a part of the Skillman Foundation's President's Youth Council. I am also a speechwriter, a public speaker, and the youth activist in the city of Detroit. And you guys spoke about media, but you guys didn't speak about biased and unbiased media in terms of how to figure out or best ways to practice how to vote and who to vote for. So what practices do you believe that young people should do in terms of research on the media that they should do in order to secure a vote for themselves and choose someone in politics who they truly believe should be their leader instead of choosing what other people say should be their leader?
I think that what we have found the last 10, 15 years is that with social media, it's easier than ever to very selectively choose what you want to see. And it's not even you actively choosing, but it's the algorithms that feed you the content that you want to see. And so I think it's important for people to make a conscious effort to actually do their own due diligence, because what you're served on your feed is just going to be what you want to see. And that's what leads to a lot of polarization. And it's not just Gen Z, but Gen Z is certainly victim to this, where the only time that you actually engage with an opposing viewpoint is when it's, you know, some cherry-picked crazy person who is, you know, their argument is shot down on something that you see. And so I think that leads to a lot of people not actually feeling that they have to challenge their own views. But I think that's really important, reading from various different sources when you're making a decision, like where you want to fall on a certain issue. I think that's really important, and I think that is a decision that a lot of young people are making and trying to continue to be intellectually curious and not just solely focused on what they want to see.
Great advice for every single one of us. Do we have another question?
Hi, my name is Chibuzo Azebo. I work at the Joyce Foundation, which invests in public policies to advance racial equity and economic mobility for the next generation of young people. My question is, what recommendations would you have for the education sector and the employment sector to help ensure that Generation Z is college and career ready?
I definitely believe forming a community is very important so that young folks are college and career ready. Creating networks, I think connecting them with people. I am a product of being invested in. I am a product of networking and being connected to different people. I actually see Vanessa Reynolds in the crowd, who helped me get into Wayne State University, which is where I graduated from. And from there, I was able to connect with so many different people. I was connected to the Skillman Foundation, which is why I'm here today. So I think connecting them to the opportunities, people that will be able to play an impact in their life. I also believe talking about their own history. What does their history consist of? Whether that be, how did they get to whatever city they're coming from? So for example, with our youth council, we actually task them with interviewing their parents and asking them, how did you get to Detroit? Because a lot of the times, the youth that are on our council, parents are immigrants, they're first generation. So it gives them a sense of belonging and pride. And it also helps them understand their parents' struggles, if there was a struggle. And that gives them, again, the sense of pride of, I'm from Detroit, but I'm also from this place. This is my history, my personal history. And then extending that to their ethnic history. What does that look like? And that just builds so much pride, and it leads to success, because you are just, like today, we were kind of, Angelique, we were gonna call our ancestors. And the ancestors are here with us. And that it makes me feel good, because it feels like I'm representing something bigger than myself. And for any young person, I think that would give motivation. And I will say as well, just talking about self-care and how, when you get to college, how do you stay there? What do I do when I'm struggling? What do I do when I don't know where to go? And pointing to where are the resources, who are the people that you need to speak to, and furthering that connection I think always being available for questions, and if you're not available for questions, connecting to someone else who would be available, I believe. And then going deeper with the education system, I believe we need to create more critical thinkers. So introducing them to concepts like analyzing an article or, dissecting research, things like that are really helpful. Teaching them about root cause analysis, because those are things that are going to come up in college. Introducing those things early on is what will prepare folks to, once they get to those higher parts.
Thank you. Yep.
Brian Calley, Small Business Association of Michigan. Full disclosure, I work with Jacob. I wanted to drill into this question that was asked a few minutes ago. You're surrounded by algorithms to kind of reinforce what you already believe. We all are, and they're really, really good. These algorithms are highly, highly effective. What role does seeking out opposing viewpoints play? Is it something that you actively look for? Who disagrees with my position, and how can I learn about why? Is that, how do you just go about checking your own biases?
Yeah, I think the biggest piece of it is just not being a passenger, not just viewing what is shown to you. I think that actively seeking out opposing viewpoints is really helpful and healthy. And so, especially now, when you can see something online that looks like it's an unbiased source and isn't. You can see things online that are just factually incorrect. So I think cross-checking certain stories with reputable sources and trying to diversify your web of where you get your information, I think is all helpful.
I know some Gen Zers who purposefully do not like certain things that they see that they like, and they purposefully like other things that they don't agree with, so that they're trying to outsmart their algorithm and their own For You page. And so I think that's a pretty interesting strategy.
To add to that, I also think that you could just follow maybe a news outlet that has an opposing view and a news outlet that has your like-minded view. It's something that I try to practice.
Alice.
Good morning, I'm Alice Thompson. I am a restorative practice advocate for years, so thank you for that, right? I do many things, but I'm one of them older people you talked about. My doctor said to me, Alice, it's not called not having memory. He said, it's a brain. It's overloaded. So you have peace about it, right? But among this senior moment we have is lots of wisdom coming out. So don't forget about that.
Of course. Of course.
So here's my question. First of all, I listened, I heard, I'm inspired. I will meditate on your words, right? Have you thought about 10 years from now, what you're willing to do in this space of ours, political space, because your voice does matter. And I want to be around to hear more from you 10 years from now. All right?
Well, 10 years from now, I'm actually attending the University of Michigan this fall to receive my master's in public health. So hopefully 10 years from now, I'll be running a program that's benefiting the community. My main focus is prevention. I really want to help my community of Southwest Detroit. I suffer from asthma, just as many of us do that are from Southwest Detroit, due to all the inequities and environmental racism that we experience on the daily. And so what I want to be doing 10 years from now is running a prevention program, maybe being a director, leading young people so that they can create the change that we want to see in our communities. So definitely going to be still doing this community work because this is my passion, but it will be in the public health sector. Definitely going to try to influence policy through the public health sector, but I really importantly will be with my community, working for my community.
I think what attracts me to the job that I do now is that we get to have these conversations with small business owners, people that are creating jobs and opportunities for people in their various communities. And we get to then take their input and then act upon it in the legislature. And so I think that no matter what I do, I think that it's going to be important to me to be able to have that that feeling that you're making a difference. And I think that being a lobbyist is a dirty word, of course, but you can be a lobbyist for something that drives you. And I think that that is something that is really important and is something that I'm always going to pursue.
We're going to take one last question.
Hi, I'm Tina Anderson. I'm with the Michigan Department of State. And I am not quite 40 yet, so I think that means I'm a geriatric millennial. And I've noticed that I'm really inspired by what you're sharing today, and I've noticed that people talk about our generations in comparison to the older generations. They don't talk about us interacting with each other. So what do you see as the challenges and opportunities of Gen Z interacting with millennials, and where would you like to see change there?
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I was actually just talking with my millennial cousin the other day about that. And specifically, I mentioned, so I'm turning 24 in a few weeks, next week, and that makes me on the I'm on the older cusp of youth now. And that we were talking about how my kind of specific age group, we're between Gen Z, but we're between the millennials. There's this term that's called zillennials, to add one to your vocabulary. So I believe that's what we kind of are. We're the zillennials, where we grew up with TV, no cell phones, and watching shows from the 90s, but then we grew up getting Instagram at 14 years old. So it's kind of, I think that's probably the best point of collaboration. Kind of noticing, you're talking with people that fit that kind of this age group, where we are already kind of collaborating, where we do have similarities. And I don't think I personally haven't seen there be much of a, not there being much dialogue, because I think the youth that I work with love millennials. I think it's things that millennials might say and make them giggle or make them laugh. But I think feeding into that, because that's always a good thing. And if you create a comfortable relationship with young people, they'll always be open to you and always be willing to work with you. And that could be done by feeding into the millennial jokes or feeding into just the differences and uplifting them rather than being like, oh, this, and that.
I think a lot of the same issues that Gen Z is currently struggling with are the issues that millennials are struggling with. Struggling to afford housing and rent, struggling to pay off their student loans. I think that there's a lot of common ground there, and I think Gen Z and millennials should be naturally allies, even if you grew up in the 90s and we grew up in the 2000s.
And Gen Alpha is on the rise, 0 to 12, and they've got Gen Z jokes. So.
Already?
Already.
Oh, gosh.
Already. You guys are on blast. Thank you so much for joining us today. Continue the conversation.
Distinguished guests, please make your way to the theater for the next session.